the unsung heroes of our church that give us the freedom that we have in the United States of America. The freedom we have to worship, the freedom we have to vote, the freedom we have to voice our opinion, the freedom we have in this place. We honor. Church, let us never forget the sacrifices that have been made by the men and women of the armed forces. Let us never, ever, ever forget the fact that they paid a price for our freedom. And they are still paying a price for our freedom. We all know that freedom does not come easy, but freedom comes with a price. So we want to honor those men and women of the armed forces. And the way we will do this morning, we will start out like this. In a few moments, those of you that have served, you're going to hear your song. And when you hear your song, we invite you to stand and come on up here to the front, and we're going to give you a pin of honor unto you. And then when you get up and after we're here, you will go out into the foyer. You'll go out into the foyer, they will organize you there, and then we'll go from that point on. So those of you men and women of the armed forces, our unsung heroes, we honor you this day. If you would please, when you hear your song.
Honor
You may be seated as our veterans go to the foyer. Will you welcome our ministry leader, Elder Tony Cardinal, over the Veterans Ministry.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure that I get to do this. It's so exciting. So many veterans in this congregation. I'm just so excited to do this. Since the birth of the United States of America on July 4th, 1776, no single generation of Americans has been spared the responsibility of defending freedom by force of arms. More than 42 million American men and women have served in time of war. More than 1 million have purchased freedom with their lives. It is my privilege today to introduce you to the many veterans in our church. You may know them or you may not. My intention is for you to meet and get to know them. They are all very special. You saw them walk up to the front when their service branch music was played, then exit to the foyer. I'm now going to call them back according to the conflict or era in which they served. Let's honor them. World War II. World War II, a global military conflict that in terms of lives lost and material destruction was the most devastating war in human history. It began in 1939 as a European conflict between Germany and an Anglo-French coalition, but eventually widened to include most of the nations of the world. It ended in 1945, leaving a new world order dominated by the United States and the USSR. More than any previous war, World War II involved the commitment of the nation's entire human and economic resources, the blurring of the distinction between the combatant and non-combatant, and the expansion of the battlefield to include all of the enemy's territories. This group has been called the greatest generation. I'd like you to meet some of them. My mother-in-law, Mary Deasy, served in Pearl Harbor after the bombing. Bob Buring. Let him tell you the stories about the torpedoes crossing the bow and the stern of his ship. Two torpedoes on either side of the ship. You watch them go by. Unbelievable. Get to know these people. Their stories are unbelievable. And, you know, it's sad to say there's not many of them left. These are some true heroes. Veterans, I salute you. Korean War. The Korean War, a civil and military struggle that was fought on the Korean Peninsula and that reached its height between 1950 and 1953. The Korean War originated in the division of Korea into South Korea and North Korea after World War II. Efforts to reunify the peninsula after the war failed. In 1949, border fighting broke out between the North and the South. On June 25, 1950, North Korea forces crossed the dividing line and invaded the South. Soon, in defense of the South, the United States joined the fighting under the banner of the United Nations, along with small contingents of British, Canadian, Australian, and Turkish troops. In October 1950, China joined the war on the north side. By the time a ceasefire agreement was signed on July 27, 1953, millions of soldiers and civilians had perished. The armistice ended the fighting, but Korea has remained divided for decades since and subject to the possibility of a new war at any time. Get to know some of these people. Hear about their incredible stories about the harsh battle conditions, the terrible winters that they had to endure. Incredible stories. Korean veterans, I thank you and I salute you. I now want to call, not a conflict, but some military interventions. Grenada, Panama, Somalia, Bosnia, Kosovo, and the Haitian conflicts. These actions were not declared wars, but nonetheless, our servicemen and women stood in harm's way in front of real bullets, from stopping a bloody coup in Grenada to restoring order and protecting food and supply convoys in ravaged Somalia, to overthrowing a brutal dictator in Panama, and participating in 66% of airstrikes in Bosnia and Kosovo to help negotiate a peace, to the intervention in Haiti to prevent civil war and anarchy. These interventions were not mainstream news, but once again, our servicemen and women acted through unwavering fortitude and the resolve to protect the freedoms that are held dear by every American. Veteran, I salute you. First Persian Gulf War. Persian Gulf War, a conflict beginning in August 1990 when Iraqi troops invaded and occupied Kuwait. The conflict culminated in fighting in January and February 1991 between Iraq and an international coalition of forces led by the United States. By the end of the war, the coalition had driven the Iraqis from Kuwait. This war showed an incredible display of military might. The evil dictator, Saddam Hussein, was driven from Kuwait. Gulf War veteran, I salute you. Afghanistan, Iraq, and the war on terrorism. (9/11, 2001 changed the world. On September 11, 2001, Americans watched in horror as two jet airliners flew into the Twin Towers of New York's World Trade Center and another crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. In the minutes and hours that followed, brave souls united in their resolve to protect and rescue. From the first responders to the regular citizens to the military personnel who stood guard over our skies and borders, many went above the call of duty and answered the highest call. These were not the superheroes of fantasy and fiction. They were ordinary people, husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, friends and colleagues. Quietly, courageously, they called upon God for help and rose to the occasion, many risking death to help others from the rubble. They are the brave, the valiant, the heroes. Our military was called into action shortly thereafter. Afghanistan has been liberated from the Taliban. The first elections ever were held just a few months ago. The first person to vote was a young woman, normally banned from voting or participating in life in general. Where the Soviet Union was bogged down for over 10 years, our military operated with superb precision, speed, and decisiveness. In Iraq, the battle for Baghdad was accomplished in record time, and the butcher of Baghdad was overthrown. 50 million people between these two countries have been liberated. Today, the battle against the insurgents in Fallujah, Iraq, wages on. We will prevail. This world is safer today due to the valiant efforts of our servicemen and women. We are taking the battle to them so that our soil will not again be soaked with American blood as it was on 9/11. Please pray for our soldiers, sailors, and airmen in harm's way. Those of you here, I salute you. Peacetime service. You are the watchman on the wall, poised, ready, ever vigilant. You have served both at home and abroad, ready to answer the call. You left your families for months and sometimes years at a time. Your individual names may not be on the pages of American history books, but your spirit, sacrifices, and determination have written history and preserved the freedom we enjoy. We live carefree because you served. Veterans, I salute you. Finally, there is a group standing out there that thinks I've messed up my chronological timetable. Or maybe my historical timeline is flawed. Maybe they think, and maybe you think as well, that I've forgotten them. In many ways, this group has surely been forgotten. But today they've been singled out and not forgotten. An unpopular war, a bloody war, a terrible war. We have not forgotten the heroes that remain. They have not been properly honored. They've never seen a parade for them, a special day, or not even a thank you. I'd like you all to get your flags, and I want you to go ahead and get ready. Please join me now in honoring, saluting, and finally thanking the heroes of Vietnam. They're sitting there for a special reason, and you'll see here in a minute. The Vietnam War, also known as the Second Indochina War, a military struggle fought in Vietnam from 1959 to 1975, involving the North Vietnamese and the National Liberation Front in conflict with the United States and the South Vietnamese Army. The United States became involved in Vietnam because American policymakers believed that if the entire country fell under a communist government, communism would spread throughout Southeast Asia. This belief was known as the domino theory. In 1965, the United States sent in troops to prevent the South Vietnamese government from collapsing. During the conflict, approximately 3.2 million Vietnamese were killed, in addition to another 1.5 to 2 million Lao and Cambodians who were drawn into the war. Nearly 58,000 Americans lost their lives. Many veterans who fought courageously in the Vietnam War came home to angry protesters who spat, cursed, and expressed disdain. The honor and respect they so richly deserved was denied them by the politics of an unpopular war and those who had no appreciation for the sacrifice that had been made on their behalf. With time, even the Americans who passionately objected to the war recognized the wrong done to these gallant men and women. More than 240 Medals of Honor, America's highest award for military valor, were presented to those who served in Vietnam. More than half were awarded posthumously. Many of those to whom these medals were awarded gave their lives in a specific act of selfless heroism. They threw their bodies over live grenades to save the lives of their fellow soldiers. As the word specifies, these brave men and women performed acts of such conspicuous gallantry as to arise above the call of duty. You need to get to know some of these people. There's Bernie Rusconi, flew many helicopter missions, ferrying Marines back and forth. Dave Warman, a couple tours in Vietnam. Jim Lastly, a radio man. You know that a radio man is the #1 target out there when they're on patrol. Bill Spurlock, 40 years, 9 months of veteran. Bill could have marched up with every one of these. I guess not the World War II though, Bill. Greg Kearns. Greg Kearns, Silver Star recipient. The citation, the Silver Star reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidness in action while serving." They always contain the same themes: leadership, bravery, courage, determination. Created by an act of Congress in 19, America's 3rd highest decoration of gallantry. Vietnam veterans, there's many stories here. You need to get to know these people. You get to need to know them. Vietnam veterans, I salute you. Thank you so much. You may be seated. now to tell a story that relates to Vietnam. That's why you're all sitting here again. Many of our veterans, Vietnam veterans, faced the conflict of battle and returned to abusive treatment and the continual mental anguish of whether their efforts were appreciated or if it made a difference at all. Today I would like to share the story of a family who escaped Vietnam that will hopefully give Vietnam veterans in particular resolution to this question. This is the story of a young pilot serving in the Air Force of South Vietnam, Lieutenant Pham, a true unsung hero. Lieutenant Pham was in the Vietnamese Air Force and trained in the United States as an air cadet at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. He was assigned to fly C-130 cargo planes at the time of the fall of South Vietnam. Lieutenant Pham realized the time for making a hard choice was fast approaching. He and his family would have to decide whether to stay or flee their homeland, Vietnam. He realized this as he flew one of the last supply missions to Da Nang, a northern city in South Vietnam, before it fell to the Viet Cong of the north. The Communist Viet Cong were beginning their advance on South Vietnam. Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, is located in the southern part of the country.